My speaker today is an award-winning journalist, a motivational speaker, and an author. I'm not going to take too much of the time, but today we are talking about transformation through the power of storytelling. And I believe she's going to do justice to that. We are going to learn a lot. Madam Traci, thank you so much once again. I'm here on the Direction. On podcast is the Direction 360. We do this once a month to bless lives. Tell us, or just speak to us, why is storytelling important to every individual?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think a lot of times, I mean, if you think about it, from the time we're born, someone is always telling us who we are, right? Our parents are guiding us as best they can. And most of the time they get it right. A lot of times they get it wrong. But we hold on to the experiences that we have, the beliefs we were given, and our core values were shaped long before we even knew what a core value was, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in who people expect us to be that we forget who we are, right? Children come into this world so pure and full of wonder, and it is slowly chipped away at us, right? As we pass through life, as we meet friends, family members, go to school, and people are hopefully doing us justice, but what they don't realize is that we sort of lose our identity, right? So when we are able to tell our own story, we choose our narrative, we choose our progress moving forward, right? And when I say tell your story, I'm talking about, you know, obviously the good, the wonderful, but also the bad, the awkward, the weird, right? Those are the things that make us who we are. Those are the gifts that we have. And if we are all brave enough, courageous enough to share our story, I believe that we can each change the world, because we all are exceptional human beings on this earth, and we all have unique gifts that no one else possesses.
Wow, that is so powerful. So for you, how did I want the audience to know a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your path through journalism, awards that by the grace of God you've had, and many impacts that you've made, how relevant it is to add that to a story or include that to a story. Okay, for people to know who you really are and what you're doing. The reason why I'm asking this is that there are a lot of people at the graveyard, if I can put it that way, that have blessed nations, that have blessed individuals, but nobody knows about them. But sometimes we only get to know about them at their funeral grounds, which to me, I don't know why it is so. You are found relevant and important in storytelling, and tell us a little bit about your life, yourself, the journey that you've gone through, and how important it is for people to learn from it too. Yeah.
Getting to the question, I promise. But I always try to find inspiration in everything that I do. And last night, you know, I was feeling a little just not energized. And I went on, and someone had recommended Jim Carrey's speech that he gave at a college back in, I think it was like 2014. So I searched for it on YouTube, and he had so many amazing nuggets, right? This is like the goofy guy, the funny guy, right? Who is like, I mean, just awe-inspiring. And one thing he said that I think this has always been my journey: you have two paths in life. You can choose love or you can choose fear. And for me, I always choose love, even when I'm afraid. And so growing up as a kid, I was always My mom used to say that I was always the child who never followed rules, never listened, right? I remember there was a time I was a little bitty girl and I was talking to the pastor of my church. We went to church every Sunday. We went to, Bible study, children's school, like we were in church all day long as, a family. And there was one time I was talking to the pastor of my church, and my mom looked over and she was almost running across the church because I was one of those people who always told people exactly what I thought. And there was no authority who I kind of looked up to unless they respected me. Otherwise, I would tell them what I thought, right? And my mom was just like, why do you always do that, right? And I was like, well, mom, he needed to know, you know what I mean? It was like that kind of thing. So I've always been very curious. And for me, questions have always been the answer, right? I don't have answers, but I've always asked lots of questions. My curiosity is off the chart. And so I remember there was a time in my school when I think I was in sixth grade, and this news anchor came. She didn't look like me. She was a white female, older, blonde hair. There was nothing about her that reminded me of me. But when she spoke and the things she said, and she talked about her job, and I remember looking over at my friends, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And they're like,
Mm.
what? And I said, no, I know I'm going to do what she's doing. And you have all these people around you who doubt you. And if you like sit in their doubt, you will never move forward, right? All my friends were like, well, you're kind of too dark for TV. Someone actually said that, by the way. I
Wow.
don't know if you're pretty enough for TV. You know what I mean? Like, and you have this is like the cycle playing in our heads all the time, right? All the people who are telling us we can't, whatever it is, you can't do that. But I knew with every ounce of my being that that's what I was destined to do back in sixth grade. So I would practice in front of the mirror. I would do all these different things. My mom, who was like my best friend, my support, she would sign me up for courses as a little girl, right? And so as I grew up, I knew that that was the path I was taking. And it wasn't until I was in college. I was up for this. It's called the Leo Baranic Fellowship. It's not around anymore, but you get to go work at one of the top stations in the nation, and you're trained by the top people. So Emily Rooney, Andy Rooney, Candy Altman, all these people trained me to be a news reporter. And it was straight out of college, very competitive. I was up against, grad students in journalism school. I mean, it was like hundreds of people would apply. And it got down to 10 of us. We were all flown in for that day. It was a process of elimination, but I knew, remember, with every ounce of my being, that that was my job. And, it got down to 2 of us. And the last question was, why do you think you deserve this more than this other guy? And
Mm.
I was like, I do not remember my answer, but I do remember looking. It was a conference room. It was a boardroom table. There were 15 people around me at the table. I'm at the head of the table. I'm 20 years old, 21 years old. And the answer I gave actually got me that job. And that's what launched my career. So when you ask about my journey, I think for me, I never allowed anyone to tell me who I am, ever, even as a kid. And I guess I was blessed with knowing that we are all on this earth for a reason, and we get to choose. We get to decide our story. But if we let other people do that for us, we'll never move forward.
Hmm. Wow. So we this you just unpacked a lot in just some few minutes. I'm very grateful for this story that you just shared. Wow. Interesting. I think 3, 4 years ago, um, 4 years or 5 years back, me driving, like started driving even before that here in the state,
Uh-huh.
uh, doing train to work back and forth. I remember entering into a train one time, and um, I went to sit um, somewhere in the train, and all of a sudden, like I could realize because I was black, all the people sitting next to me, they all stood up. And uh, so I checked my time and my date to see whether we are still in the 1960s or something like. was 2020 something, and I'm like, wow, people still do some of these things. And I was surprised. I mean, these are stories that I hear back when I was in Ghana, like when I was growing up as a kid. But to literally come and experience it yourself at a point, I was surprised. And what you're saying right now, I'm kind of relating to it, you know, in a very interesting way. The emotions that go around that, but the big part is what you've learned through that, and it has really made you like a very strong woman to accomplish all that you have. Um, when it comes to impact and purpose, how do you define purpose for our audience here to know or to understand? I define purpose in a very simple way that I've been taught. That purpose is the reason for the why of what of your existence. It is the reason for the why of what of your, so there's a reason, there's a why, there's a what for your existence. In your own way, how do you define purpose, and how do we connect that to our life stories and what we should share and the impact that it can help us to make in life?
It's so funny. I may have to steal that from you, Kaiser. I hope you don't mind. I love that. That is fantastic. I think the way I describe purpose is the reason you are here, right? It is a journey that we walk every day. And I don't believe that purpose is one thing. I think people get caught up on that, right? I got caught up on that. I mean, I was like, I got to find my purpose. It's not like, it's under a rock and you lift up the rock and there is the purpose. I think it is the journey you walk, and purpose changes with the different journey that you are on, right? I
Yeah,
believe my purpose on this earth is to, through storytelling, convince people that they are worthy and that they are capable of the impossible, capable of making change in this world. Even though we stand as one, when you are surrounded by a community, it's amazing the change that you can make, right? So I encourage people, do you find your posse, find those people who are aligned with you and lean on them. I mean, you talk about our meeting, and I think that you kind of glossed over one point. We meet people and touch people in different ways every day. If you think about the place we met, there were what, hundreds, maybe thousands of people who walk those halls every day. And the fact that the two of us connected the way we connected, it was more of a professional setting, but there was some sort of synergy there where we were like, okay, we are like-minded. Like,
yeah,
and you reached out before I did. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Shouldn't you do this? And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know how to do that. Can you tell me how to do that? You know what I mean? And that became the conversation, right? So it was
yeah,
almost like you gave me the olive branch first, and you sort of disarmed, because we all have this armor on when we walk, if you think about it, right? Nobody wants to be embarrassed. Nobody wants to, why are you talking to me? Like I'm like the person who talks to everybody. Well, and I'm just like da 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 da. And I have some people look at me like, oh, are you talking to me? It's like we have been conditioned to stand off, just like the people who got up in the train, right? They, in their minds, saw you as a threat for whatever reason, because that's how they've been conditioned. We are
yeah.
not conditioned to love people, to reach out and say, hey, how are you? I want to hear what's going on in your life. That's weird. So yeah, so purpose is a journey. It's a journey.
Purpose
You don't
and
walk the
wow.
journey alone.
I like that. I like
Mhm.
that. Purpose is a journey. We don't walk that journey alone. That is super interesting. And thank you for saying that. I hope everybody up here, you've been blessed. You're learning something. Uh, I kind of always want to open up myself and and be a blessing to people, even if I can't do it in works by giving physical stuff out. I try to do that through my words. And it looks like it's something that you've been doing for many years, for many years, like through journalism, through the people that you've interviewed, people that you've met, and all that. Right. Now, let's say somebody is up here basically watching us, listening to us, going to listen to us. and they want to be a very good storyteller. Where do they start from? How do they connect the dots? Because I feel sometimes for some people it can be very hard. It can be very difficult. You know, not everybody can be a pastor. Not everybody can stand to preach. You know, not everybody can be a footballer on the field. Some need to be a spectator. But when you have the chance to do it, how can somebody be a very good storyteller? Like, what are there some steps that we can learn from? That probably
Yeah,
you also.
absolutely. So, here's the funny thing about storytelling, Kaiser. I think that we all get caught up in, okay, I've been telling stories for years, like truly for decades. I have been telling stories, right? I've been so blessed that people open their hearts, their homes, they let me in, they tell me some of their deepest, darkest secrets. And I mean, like I was in a jail cell once, right? They sent me to talk to this guy who's a murderer. And I'm like, oh
Tell me
my God.
about it.
Yeah, right. No, it was ridiculous. And it's one of those things like, on TV, you got a big wall in between you and they're over there and you're over here. And I walk in this room and we are sitting at a table, like you and I would be sitting at a table. And I'm like, oh, and then the guard closes the door and I'm like, oh, do you have to leave too? And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm sitting across this guy and, he says to me, I watch you on TV all the time. I was like, I don't want you to watch me on TV. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, and it was, I can't think, there was a little girl who disappeared. It was a horrible story from her front yard. And this guy admitted to taking her and giving her to someone else. So I went in, I'm not even sure why they sent me in, but I went in to do a news story and to talk to this guy. And he literally told me where the child was.
Wow.
It took all of my energy to have this conversation with this man, right? And I remember walking out, I went back to my TV station and I said to my producer, I will never do that again. I will never do that again, ever, because it took a piece of my soul talking to him.
Mm.
And one of the quotes I never forget that he said was, when you kill someone once, it's easy to do it again. And I was just like, it was such a dark space for me. So that is one of the experiences I had. So when you talk about storytelling, I think the number one step is you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable.
You have to allow yourself to be involved, right?
Involved and
Okay.
vulnerable. Right. Vulnerable. Because if you dig really deep down inside and tell, for instance, a story that has impacted you in some way, people will listen, right? We do have amazing storytellers, but if you look through history, we are all storytellers. We're telling stories every day of our lives. If you think, there are people who are telling stories who are lying through their teeth, but they're interesting stories, right? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's not even a step that you have to take. It's more of being authentic. What is your story? Start with your own story, right? I tell people all the time, be authentic. If you don't want the public to know, start journaling, right? Go buy a book every day. Your job is to write down either, to start with a prompt. What will today be, right? In the morning, what will today be? And in the evening, did I accomplish my goals? Did I do what I said I was going to do? Just use those two prompts, right? Because it's just practice. It's practice. And I promise you, at the end of 6 months, and if you can hold off into a year, you probably have a story that is worthy of a book, right? If you are honest and truthful and authentic, right? What do I want to accomplish today? So my day, I can tell you what my day looks like every day, and I don't accomplish it every day. When I wake up in the morning, there's a glass of water. I always have a glass of water with me at all times. I feel like, you've slept all night, you're dehydrated, you need to replenish. I wake up, I have a glass of water. I meditate for 20 minutes. When I don't meditate, my day does not go as planned. And for me, meditating isn't quieting my mind. It's more of sitting in silence for 20 minutes. I try to have a yoga practice. So this is a fun fact about me. I'm a yoga instructor. So I teach yoga. right? So I try to have my own personal yoga practice just for me. And then I write down, what do I expect from myself today? And then I go about my way. That's sort of my story for the day. So again, not hard. There aren't necessarily steps that will make everybody a storyteller, but I believe that everyone is already a storyteller. So it's important to start telling your story and be influenced by other people. I would say, you know what, get a group of girlfriends together and tell one story a day. What's your story? What are you talking about today? That'll be fun.
That is interesting. Good to know how you started, and if people can align with that, they can also start that way too. Now, when it comes to storytelling, right? I'm just trying to understand everything and how you go about it step by step. And I think this is very helpful. For somebody like me, I grew up in the place, even when it comes to like writing, I had that grace from a mentor of mine called Author of Enchi, right? And what you just said brought something to mind about how he can sit down and within a day or two, he can write a whole book. A day or two, he can write a whole book. It brings me to that particular light or that particular point that he has a lot to share. And yeah, he has a lot to share. So he can just sit behind his computer and it's just writing. And gradually I started picking up that thing because I realized, oh, there's something within me that I can also put it one way or together to share and get people to listen. I may not probably have a megaphone shouting it out there, but I can quickly, do that, but can you share an example of a story that let me put it that way, that had a significant impact on you and also your audience? I know you have a lot of stories, but this one has probably a significant impact on you that if possible, if it's also here too, I don't mind you sharing that too. Okay, I don't mind you sharing that too. And I mean your audience, people that you've spoken to over the years, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to making impact in life. Yeah.
So I will, you know what, one of the big, you kind of touched on it earlier, when I met Oprah. I think that for me was very impactful, and it came at a time when I really needed it. So that was another God ordained moment, if you will. I was a Washington correspondent in Washington, D.C., covering the White House and Capitol Hill. That was my job. And I read somewhere that Oprah Winfrey was coming to town. This is way back. I can't remember what year it was, but she was doing this Live Your Best Life tour. And I said to my boss at the time, we only work Monday through Friday. She was coming in on a Saturday. And I said, hey, can I get a photographer so that I can go do an interview with Oprah? And I remember she just fell out laughing. She thought that was the funniest thing ever. And she goes, you're going to interview Oprah. And I said, yeah. And she goes, Trace, how are you going to interview Oprah? I said, I don't know. I said, but if I can figure out how to interview Oprah, can I get a photographer on Saturday? And she's like, absolutely. Like, in her mind, she's thinking, there's no way this girl is going to interview Oprah. I didn't know Oprah. I had no connections to Oprah. I didn't even know how to contact Oprah. Do you see what I mean? So I sat down and, once I got the okay for a photographer, I made a list of all of the possible ways to reach Oprah, right? Not even knowing that anything would work. But again, it's one of those things. You ever have that gut feeling where you're like, I know this is possible, right? I just knew it was. And I reached out to our company at the time, was Hearst Argyle Television was the name of the company. It was part of the Hearst family. And Hearst owned magazines and all kinds of stuff. So as I was researching ways to reach Oprah, Hearst published the O magazine. And I thought, oh my God, okay, all right, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to call the magazine people. They were like, girl, seriously. And I was like, okay. So then Fred Young, who was the guy, he was like one of my mentors. I called Fred, and he was also an executive in the company. And I said, okay, Fred, this is what I want to do. I don't know how to do this. Who do you know over at the magazine? Because I think that's my only entry point. He calls somebody, the person calls me, I tell them what I want. They were like, that's impossible, right? And I said, yeah, but is it? Is it really? I said, you know what? If you can just give me a name of somebody. I just kept going and going and going and going. Like every time someone gave me a name, I got another name, got another name. And then I ended up talking to Oprah's publicist.
Wow.
This took me about 2 months to work on this, okay? But every day I knew I was going to do something to chip away at this. So talked to Oprah's publicist, and she said they were like, E.T. and
Yeah.
I forgot, they were right.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
other company, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
One other company was allowed to talk to Oprah, and then, let's see if we can get you on the red carpet. So I was like, okay. So a couple of days before she arrived, they called me back and they said, Oprah has agreed to the interview. And I was like, oh, are you kidding? So I called my boss. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to interview Oprah. She goes, you are not. And I was like, no, I am. I really am. So it was like 3 of us on the red carpet, like some big network, ET and me. Right. And it was amazing because, Gail got out of the car, her hairdresser got out of the car, all these people got out of the car, then Oprah got out of the car, and there are like thousands of people out there like yelling and screaming, and it was amazing. And then, she did the first interview, and the first person, he was a white guy, and he asked some question like, what is it about you that people think is so amazing? And I was like, that is not an Oprah question. And so she like looked at me, and she looked back at him, and she said, what? And he repeated the question, and she looked back at me, and she goes, you know what? She said, white men don't get it sometimes. They're white people, white men. And she talked to him for maybe two minutes. Oprah stood there. They told me I would have 30 seconds to a minute, right? Oprah and I talked for almost 9 minutes. And it was amazing because I remember one of the questions, I was like stumbling out my questions, right? Because it was just amazing just to be there. And one of the questions I asked her was, what is it about you? Why are you the chosen one? Why are you so special? And she kind of leaned back and she said, I'm not special. I said, oh, but you are. And I said, there are thousands of people. I mean, there were people, like the crowd was ridiculous. They were people crying and screaming because they were in her presence. And I said, this doesn't happen for most people. And she goes, you know what? She said, the thing that's different between me and everybody else, I know why I'm here. I know my purpose. I am on this journey. And when you start to listen to the higher power that guides you, you will be on your journey and you will reach the highest point that you are meant to be. Most of us are listening to our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, everybody telling us who we should be and not going inside listening to ourselves. And she said, again, that's the only difference. I have been blessed enough to know that the universe is guiding us all. And for me, that was life-changing because like everybody else, I've been living my life on repeat, right? Wake up, go to work, go home, maybe go shopping, go out with friends, go shopping, you know what I mean? And she changed my life in that moment because I realized that when we look within for the answers, not on the outside, when we decide that other people's approval doesn't matter, when we decide that, we are led by God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, when we decide that it is our inner well-being that matters more than anything, I think then we can talk about purpose, higher powers, changing the world and the universe.
Wow. Then we can talk about purpose. I mean, the subject of purpose, talking about higher powers, talking about God, um, it always stands out so strong to me, and the impact that it can really have on our lives. But anyway, that's a very powerful story. It's and for those of you that you want to go deeper into that story, it's right here in this book. Trust me. I've immediately she started talking about Oprah's story. I'm like, this is going to get interesting, and you could see in here in the book, I keep underlining and underlining stuff. Like one of the things that you actually said here that I really appreciate that. I don't know if you can touch on that also. I think it will be connected or related to the earlier question that I asked you. You said your gifts were put in place long before you stepped foot here on this earth. And let me read the whole thing. God, or if you prefer, the universe has big dreams for you. You just have to embrace them and live your mission. You know, when it comes to our dreams, our gifts, our callings, living our vision, living our dreams, where do one start from, or where can people start from? I mean, I'm talking about let's say an audience that, or people, or a person that has been battling with this in their mind, in their spirit, in their whole being. Like, hey, I know I can do this. I know I have these abilities. I know I have these callings. Where do I start from? For me, when you ask me, my first point is going to be pray. Start with prayer. It's very, very important. Like, push it out there in prayer. Then, be in the right environment or work towards it. But for you, do you mind sharing that with us? Like, where do you think people should start from? Somebody who has all the gifts, but bringing it out and putting it out there.
You know, it's funny. I'm going to lean over a little bit and tell you. So I have this little sticky on my wall, and it's right behind my computer. And it says, Jesus has more confidence in us than we have in ourselves. Don't be codependent, right? This is like the little thing I have on my wall behind me, just to kind of remind me sometimes that prayer is powerful, right? So I fully agree with you on that. I think the other thing is that, and it seems so simple, but we don't do it, self-care, right?
Self-care.
Self-care. Be selfish enough to care for yourself, because I think, especially as women, right, we are required to move mountains. I mean, literally, like we work every day, we clean, we cook, we take care of family. It just goes on and on and on. And at the end of the day, we're so exhausted that we kind of drop in the bed, right? I think that when we are absolutely, here's what I believe with all of my heart. We are all extraordinary. We really, truly are all extraordinary. We are not all meant to be football players and movie stars and all the things that our society has decided, it's like the pinnacle of all things, right? I think that you have to find time for yourself and sit in your own silence, sit in your own presence, right? If that is prayer every night, right? Have a prayer corner where you go to your prayer corner and everyone knows that when you are there, you're not to be disturbed. Or put a little sign on the door, give me 15 minutes. Maybe it's one of the places where I get all of my creative thoughts is when I'm in the shower. It is shocking, the stuff that most of my book, I came up with ideas while I was taking a shower, right? It is that meditative practice. If you think about it, prayer is meditation as well. It's like you're trying to talk to God. Go on a walk, take a shower, anything that brings you this kind of silence that you need to understand what your gifts are. And then I also believe in jotting down all the things that bring you joy, right? If like shopping brings me joy, I would love to be a buyer for like some big store, right? I'm like, man, I can do that. I know that I can do that. And if you don't know, ask the people closest to you, ask the people that you trust. What are some of my qualities? What are some of the things that bring me joy? And lean into those things. Make them your hobby, and maybe your hobby then becomes your job. And you're giddy every day to wake up because you get to do what you love. So that's how you kind of discover your gifts. Figure out the things that give you that flow, right? Where you're doing it like for 2, 3, 4 hours and you can't even remember where the time went because you were sitting doing that thing. So no, you got to lean into your gifts to understand what they are. And I talk to people about that all the time. Let's talk about your gifts. And people are like, oh my God, I never thought about it that way.
Wow. So it's always good to be in the presence of people that are ready to talk to you about your gifts, are ready to talk to you about your calling, so that
Absolutely.
my mentor always, my spiritual father and mentor always, Author Aventure would tell me, you need to leave this earth a finished book. I mean, you need to be read back and forth so that people will learn from your life, and also impact other generations. It's always important to have that in mind. I mean, back to the book. I mean, for anybody here, like I keep telling you, you need to grab this book. And another interesting thing that you wrote here, you're like, I want to. No, I think I underlined that. I loved that so much. I, I think you've addressed a first part of that because that was in relation to purpose, but
Yes.
it was in relation to purpose, which I really love. Then I wanted to know how they were doing it, what made them special, and what they know the rest of the world didn't. And you can see here, I've put that into you know, what are inverted commas or whatever you call it. I've written behind the direction. I'm like, oh, this book is speaking to me, and it's even about this. Yeah, because at the point you wanted to go deeper to know about what makes people unique, what makes Oprah, what makes the people that you've interviewed what they are. And the question to you is this: like, over many years of doing that, of interviewing people, can you share with us some lessons, some point that really stands out to you, that okay, these are the things that make people people? I mean, great men, billionaires. Okay, great journalists, great vision fighters and mission, conquerors. Are there things that you can share with us on that? Today, it's all about tapping into your knowledge, tapping into your information. So, yeah, I'll be very grateful if you can share that with us too.
What I found that, so when I was writing the book, I interviewed dozens of women, right? I really wanted to talk to women who were like doing something amazing.
Yeah.
Like one person in the book, she owns a trucking company, a spice company, over 150 acres in California. She decided to plant oranges. She sells her oranges to Tropicana, but she keeps the peelings and the pulp so she can sell it to the government so they can use that to make fuel. I mean, like the stuff in her head, I'm like, who does that, right? Like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, how'd you come up with that? But I found that the people who I talked to, they have never deterred from their mission,
They've
right?
never heard from their mission.
Never.
Wow.
Brittany O'Grady is an actress, and she has, I've known her for years, and she has always been high drama, right? No matter what. She's like, oh my God, I broke my fingernail. Like it was just like, I'm like, girl. So everyone kept saying you should be an actress because, oh my goodness. But that's who she has always been. But it was growing up, it was considered a bad thing to be high drama, right? So everyone laughed at her because they're like, why are you always like that? Like, can't you tone it down? Do you really need to be? So instead of taking that as a negative, she took it as, this is my gift, this is who I am. And though you don't see my purpose and my drama, I can see where this takes me. Her mother enrolled her in acting classes, and she was one of the girls who starred in the film Star, in the show Star. I don't know if you've seen that. It was like a
Oh,
spinoff.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, she was fantastic. But all of these people have never been deterred from their mission. They took their gifts, even if they were seen as a negative, but they took their gifts, leaned into them, and that got them to where they are now.
So they never deter from their mission. So
Never
that's
deterred.
I should definitely take that as point one. Never deter from your mission. Any other point that you think, or any other lessons that you think will be good to know? Let's say somebody in the financial space that you've probably interviewed. Um, what do you think are some of the things that really kept them there? Because I think one of the pages was talking about something in relation to money. I've not gotten there yet, but I saw it. I was just glancing through that and I saw it. Yeah.
I think even in the financial space, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that we don't walk this journey alone, right? So I tell people all the time, don't get deterred from your mission. Whatever you decide your mission is, lean into your gifts, right? Whatever those gifts are, make sure they're not seen as a negative. Even if others see them, lean into them. When we talk about money, I think everyone is afraid to have that conversation. I always say, and this is where I learned from some of these women, seek out the person who is doing what you're doing and have them either sit down and have a conversation with you and make connections, or have them become your mentor. Because the only way you're going to learn to be that vice president, that investment banker, whatever it is, seek out the person doing the job you are doing. And lastly, I always tell people questions are always the answer, right? You gotta ask questions. People, I can't tell you how many people I walk in and she was like, I don't want to ask. I mean, they're just so big. I don't want to ask. I say, remember that these people who are executives, who are even vice presidents or whatever, they once sat where we're sitting right now. They weren't always that way. I met this guy last week. He's Derek Adams. I was invited to this private dinner celebrating Derek Adams. I didn't know who Derek Adams was, right? No clue, but I ended up sitting next to him. And Derek Adams is, he's an artist. His art is amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I asked him, do you have one of his pieces? And he goes, Traci, his art sells for $500,000. I was like, ooh, oh my gosh, okay. Okay, well, Derek Adams is big, right? But if you talk to Derek, he's like me and you, right? I loved him. We had the best time. We were taking selfies together, cracking up, laughing. People are afraid to ask questions. And more times than not, they'll get the answer and they'll get a connection that they didn't have before. So those are my tips.
Wow. Ask questions. That I really and strongly agree to. I always say, hey, if you don't ask, you never know. You know, you never know. And somebody also said a closed mouth is a closed destiny. So you
Yes.
always have to be ready to ask. You always have to be ready to say it. And just like you said earlier on, I would add to that by saying nobody's an island.
No.
You know, you always want to find out how did they do it? How can I do it? So constantly ask questions. But my next question actually to you is this: in relation to storytelling, right? How does storytelling influence emotions and perceptions? Because sometimes it can go the other way that people want it to go. So how does it help? How does it like influence emotions, perceptions? I'm very glad if you can address that.
Well, it's so funny. There was a study that was done years ago, and I can't quote it because I do not have it in front of me, but I was just talking to someone about this. People are 9 times more likely to respond to a story than they are to you just telling them what to do. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you are in a business meeting, if you can start off with a story that has a purpose, that is directing people, if you just walk in and say, hey, look, I need you to, finish that report by 4 o'clock today. And then when you finish, why don't you run down the street because we have somewhere to go. And then I have, you know what I mean? If you're telling somebody what to do, but if instead you say, listen, it's really important that we finish this report today. I was just speaking with a woman and she has been, this actually did happen. She was in a violent relationship with her husband. She has nowhere to go because there are no shelters in DC that just take single women. You have to have children. They take families, they don't take single women. She doesn't have anywhere to go. So we have to get this paperwork done because we're opening a new facility. And as quickly as we can get her into that facility, she can get out of this abusive relationship and we can get her on a path of changing her life and give her the strength she needs to get a new job, to move on from this. Right now, she doesn't have any resources. So the work we're doing, though it may seem tedious, is so important to changing a life.
Wow.
You see what I mean? There's a
Yeah.
difference, and that truly did happen. Like the person was sitting in the meeting telling everybody, we got to do this, we got to do this, but they're not telling the why. Why do we have to move so quickly? So in telling that story, the executive who walked in, everyone was like, okay, guys, so yeah, are you guys all good with staying late? It just changed the whole mood and the tone of why we do what we do. So if you can find ways to incorporate storytelling in work, it will inspire teams. It will increase production. It will change your situation and possibly get you a promotion. But even at home, when I tell my children to do something, I never simply say, hey, I need you to get up and go to clean your room. I give them a reason why, and the reason is always a short story. So we have all been telling stories, Kaiser. It's not just something that we came up with, and it's
Mm.
not something that is so special that it has to be like, a soliloquy and, like it has to be like poetic and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just start small. Just work with what you have right now and grow from that.
Mm. Start small, work with what you have, and grow from there.
Favorite political person. So I've been incredibly blessed in my career. I mean, covering the White House, I've covered 4 presidents, and my favorite political storyteller is Barack Obama. I mean, he is amazing. And so I had an opportunity to go into the Oval Office with my family and take a picture with Barack Obama. And when we got there, I'm thinking, okay, hurry up because we got to get this picture done because he has a lot to do. And he's like, oh, no, sit down. And he's telling these stories. And I'm like, in awe. I have like pictures of me going, you know what I mean? Like just because he is just like a natural storyteller. And even to be in his presence and hear him speak, his conversation is one story after another, right? And they're funny and they're kind and they're warm. And I always tell people, have empathy when you're telling a story. Know who your audience is when you're telling any story. And every story has to have like a strong beginning, a hook, something that pulls people in, a lesson, and then something to sum it up. And if you want to sum it up, I always say marching orders or inspiration or something that is memorable that you leave them with. But if you allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to put your personal story in the story, or show a side of yourself that you've never shown, I think that itself will make it a memorable story. And I don't remember the next part of the question.
So I think that it was about what's your how do you embellish your story, and what are the elements of a good story? If I
I guess, how do I embellish my story? I always put something funny in it, right? If it's a joke or a silly story or something like that. And I allow people to laugh at me, right? Because, we all have those stories that, I mean, I know we don't have time, but I can tell you one that would be pretty funny.
yeah.
But I think, like I said, interesting hook. Make sure there's a personal facing story in that story. For preachers, I think that you're constantly telling stories about yourself as a minister, right? I think some of the best ministers, they reach back in their childhood. I think I've heard every minister talk about the lessons that they learned from their grandmother,
Yeah.
because we all have those lessons, right? So I think you do incorporate some of those personal stories because we're all trying to walk God's path, right? So when you look at the Bible, hopefully you can see examples of the life that you're living and you're able to share that in your ministry.
Wow. Thank you so much for that insightful um, explanation and submission, and I mean sharing with us all these powerful things that you've experienced in life. And I always say that for every good side of a thing, there's sometimes a challenging side too. So quickly, let's look at common mistakes that people do when trying to tell a story, because we are all not good at it. I always ask this to everybody that comes up here. You know, try you think sometimes you are good at it, but you realize that no, somebody does it very well. And I think you started touching on one or two of them. Before that, some I wanted a promotion at one place of work, and I knew I was working very hard at that time. That was like years ago. Now, for everybody that you want to go on a particular level or a particular promotion in that particular place of work, they always give you this mentor that actually helps you. And I didn't understand most of the things until one time one of the mentors, one of the people that was supposed to help me, or if I can use the word, like groom me to that particular office that I needed, sat me down and was like, I want to tell you something. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm all ears. Just talk to me. I was like, you know something? I realized that you do great work. You do your numbers are great. You are awesome. Like every everybody can see that you are doing it, but nobody can actually read it. Nobody can actually read it because you are not documenting it well. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is that in that particular organization, there's a platform that they've created where we call it, I think you mentioned that earlier on, when it comes to journaling or writing down what you have done. It's not what somebody have done, you have done. So that before your interview or any other thing, they can look at that and tell you, okay, you want an internal promotion. So from the beginning that you had the earlier promotion, this and this and that is what you have done. So based on that, let's interview you on that. And to me, it was a huge lesson for me. So a lot of the things that you're saying here right now, I'm really connecting to it so well. I'm really understanding that so well. But I feel there are some mistakes that sometimes people do, like trying to be the best at telling the story. Can you outline some of that? Can you talk about some of that so that we can learn from that too?
Oh, absolutely. I think that you need to know your audience, right? I've had people come up and, in a room full of I don't know, doctors, they're telling like silly stories about, mistakes doctors make. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sitting there going, oh, this is not the audience for that. You know what I mean? Like, so I think knowing your audience and know that you have to connect with your audience. I can't tell you how many people walked on stage. I'm actually working with someone right now, will be working with someone who I used to do media training for years. I don't do it anymore, but this is a friend of mine. And all of my friends who are executives call me up and they say, okay, girl, I got 5 minutes. What am I? And I always tell them, know what your points are before you even get there. What are the 3 things that you have to say? What is your message? Before you even get up there, I don't care what your speech is. What is the message that are you trying to convey that purpose is essential to living a great life? What is it you're trying to convey? Before you walk up there, know what your message is, right? What are the 3, 4, 5 points, no more than 5, that you're trying to make when you get up there? Never memorize your speech, ever, never, ever, never, ever, because once you memorize it, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to trip you up and you will never be able to get back to that point, right? But if you know what your 5 points are, or your 2 or 3 stories, if you know those and you have an outline of your speech, you will always do well. Show up as yourself. When you're up there trying to pretend to be someone else, like I have a friend who's like, I'm gonna go up and I'm gonna be like Kevin Hart. And I was like, nobody can be like Kevin Hart. You know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking? Like, why would that even be in your mind? Right. But I have people who do that. And when I used to do media training, they're like, okay, so who should I be? And I'm like, why don't you be yourself? You know what I mean? So I think those are, as you go up there, that's when people start messing up. And the other thing is, you will make a mistake. It's okay. Acknowledge it and move on. I've tripped on stage. And I'm like, okay, somebody has got to fix that. You know what I mean? And then I walk on. Or, you know what I mean? Things will happen. They will absolutely happen. And it's okay. I think that I always tell people before you go out on any stage, and actually before you go out in life, realize that things are not happening to you. You are allowing things to happen. Do you see what I mean? And it's not, and they will happen, but how do you address it? How do you face it, right? How are you going to face that adversity? Or if someone yells at you, are you going to yell back or realize that they're just having a bad day and move on? So things will happen to you on stage. Take a breath and move through it. It does not end your life.
Madam Traci, thank you so much for coming up, for being a blessing to us, teaching us, making us understand the power of storytelling. Now, before we go, for the many women that are watching, that are listening to us, I know you are heavily into women empowerment too. And for for the men that are also watching, that are listening and all that, your final words to everybody, to all of us, that can propel us, help us to move into that next dimension of our lives. That would be a blessing.
Well, I have to say this whole time has been a blessing for me, and it is truly an honor for me to be here with you and with everyone on right now. And I think my final words would be that we each have the amazing possibility to be whatever we want to be. We are extraordinary beings. We are blessed with God-given talents, and the tragedy of all of it would be to live this life without knowing who you truly are and the reason you're on this earth, and not walk your God-given purpose. And I think it is the duty of all of us to live in the extraordinary being that we are and accept nothing less than authenticity from ourselves and from everyone else, because we are truly capable of making the impossible possible.
Wow. We are truly capable of making the impossible possible. For everybody listening, for everybody watching, know that. Like, go back, finish that book you want to finish. Go back, finish that, start that business you want to start. Anything that it is said to be impossible in your family, from where you're coming from your background, know that from today, you are capable of making it possible. Thank you so much. I'm so much grateful. And I'm hoping we get to do this once again. We're definitely going to do a part 2. we'll come here one more time with a part 2, and I know people are going to be blessed. And possibly also, let's prepare yourself for all my audience here. Prepare yourself for a master class or something, something that will take you deeper into what you have to learn, what you need to know. Madam Traci, thank you so much. I'm so much grateful. We are so much grateful for everybody showing up. I'm grateful for being here, for you being here. And look out for the Direction 360 podcast. It will be there also on YouTube. Just type my name, my first name, my last name. It should pop up. You see some few videos that you're going to be blessed.